Welcome back to HomeSpot, everyone. So on today's episode, we're going to be doing cutting boards. So I'm going to show you how to take just a random piece of lumber, rough piece of lumber, and make it into a finished product. So we're going to be doing everything from edge grain to end grain to even a little bit of curves here and there. And again, this is just however you want. You can let your creativity flow completely with this. So without further ado, let's get to work. Okay, so up first, we need to cut our wood down to much more manageable pieces. Now, all of our cutting boards are going to be between 15 to 20 inches long, so we want our pieces of wood a little bit longer just to give us a little bit of room to play with. And then once we're done with that, we move on over to the table saw and start cutting them widthwise. And here we're just kind of cutting down to whatever sizes. Again, no rhyme or reason. We're trying to make more manageable pieces. And more pieces. And more pieces. And a lot more pieces. Okay, and once we're done cutting and ripping all of our boards to length and width, we now move on over to the planer. So we want to get everything nice and flat. Now the boards are already S2S, so meaning they're flat on two sides. We just make that third and fourth side perfectly flat. Now, once we have a bunch of strips, now we kind of just play around with the spacing, the wood itself, the colors, whatever looks nice, that's what we're going to go with. Again, no real rhyme or reason. We're chugging along here. Once we have the combination that we like, it's time to throw some glue on and throw it in some clamps. The more clamps, the better, of course. Now, as far as the glue, I do let it glue up for at least 6 hours before I run it through the planer. And once you run it through the planer, now it's time to get all the sides nice and square. Now, at this point, this is where I wanted to challenge myself a bit. Now, I could make a just regular striped cutting board all day, but we wanted to go a little step further and make some angles. So we cut a few pieces of wood into 45s, glued them up. Once the glue is dry, we take it out of the clamps and we're actually going to add some more wood to the sides here. And this is just going to make the cutting board wider. So we already have what the cutting board is going to feature, but we need a little more width. And again, in adding these boards here, we're kind of just playing with the contrast of the colors. This was definitely by far I don't want to say the hardest cutting board, but this definitely did require the most attention. It took a total of 3 glue ups, and you'll see why. So I've already done 2 glue ups right there, and I still have to cut it down into little strips just like this and glue those little strips up. We actually flip the strips a whole 90 degrees and we glue it all up. Okay, on to the next one. So with this one, I wanted a little bit of an alternating pattern. So I did the walnut just on one side and the maple on the other side. On the walnut, there are some smaller strips separating it. And once it's all glued up, I'll cut it into little strips again and just flip one of them over, as you'll see here in a little bit. Okay, on this next one, I wanted to challenge myself a little bit. So we start by alternating patterns with the maple and the cherry. Throw it in the clamps for the first glue up. Once that first glue up is done, we throw it through the planer to make it nice and even, and we rip it down into small strips once again. And as you can see, if we just alternate every other piece, it turns it into a checkered board design. This is one that I've been wanting to do for a while. Okay, and once I took this out of the clamps, I didn't think it was fully done, so I wanted to add a little feature to the edges. So I added some of the darker walnut to all 4 of the sides, doing 2 first and then the other 2 afterwards. Okay, on to the next one. So with this next one, I knew I wanted to do some thin strips and do it into a curve. So I wanted to leave the center kind of blank, kind of plain. That way I can run it through the bandsaw and just make some curves out of it and just simply glue it up. Now, since the thin strip of Purple Heart is so thin, it'll just conform and bend to the actual shape that I just cut. Okay, so on this last cutting board, my wife really liked the very first one I made with the 2 purple stripes on each side, and I had quite a bit of purple heart left, so we went with something very similar, except we did 3 stripes of purple, with the purple getting larger and larger towards the end. Now once the glue is all dried up, we take it out of the clamps and we run it through the planer here. Now this planer has been a workhorse, so major shout out to the planer here. and now that we're done with making all of the cutting boards, it's time to fine tune them. So all of these striped cutting boards do get a 40-degree bevel on each one of the sides. This 40-degree bevel, just one, looks nice, and secondly acts as the grab handles. That way you don't have to make any additional handles themselves. Okay, and for all of the non-striped cutting boards, those all do get their own specific handle. I do run it through the router. I am using a flat bottom router bit. At first I tried using a round bullnose bit. That wasn't turning out very well, so I went with a flat bottom bit, and that made everything perfectly fine. Okay, and moving on, we move on over to the little rubber feet, and these are all going to be inset 1.5 inches from both sides. And I'm just simply laying it out, center punching it, and drilling it out. Now, the rubber feet will actually not be installed until after the cutting board has finished on it, but right now we're just preparing for that. Okay, so now we move on over to sanding, and we're pretty much just going through the grits here. So from 120, 150, all the way up to 220. Do a little bit of hand sanding on the edges. Now the edges, be a little bit careful. You don't want to necessarily round them over. You just want to smooth out the edge. You just want to make sure it's not sharp. Alright, once we're done with that, we do water pop every single one of the cutting boards, and you just simply spray it down with water, let it dry, and sand it on over with some 220 or higher grit sandpaper. And the reason you do this here is whenever you actually take the cutting board to actually wash for the first time, it'll raise the grain. So you might as well raise it now instead of when the cutting board is already finished. And then lastly, everyone's favorite part, including my own, the finishing. And this is where you can actually start to see all of the colors truly pop. Now, as far as finishing, it does take a total of 3 coats at least. So 1 coat, let it dry for about 6-7 hours, sand it down very slightly with some 300, 400, 500, 600 grit sandpaper, whatever you have that's super fine. Just quick sand down and throw another coat, and you're going to repeat this a total of 3 times. Okay, and before we can say that we are done, last step of the project is those rubber feet. And again, everything's already pre-drilled for us. We just have to simply go in there and screw them down. All right, everyone, just like that, we are done with our cutting board. So as you can see, 7 total cutting boards. Again, I really had no rhyme or reason when I started. I had an end goal, which was cutting boards, but how we got there was TBD. Obviously, we're here. This is what they look like now. We did a lot of experimentation. We learned a lot. I hope everyone that gets these enjoys them for lots of years to come. And actually, speaking of years to come, so some maintenance facts here. So first off, these are not dishwasher safe. They are water resistant, but they are definitely not waterproof, as pretty much anything with wood. So every so often, every 2 to 3 months, or give or take, whenever you start to see the wood start to just get hazy, dull on the finish here, you do want to recondition them. And the way you want to do that is butcher block oil. And I'll leave a link down in the description below as to where you can find that. You're also welcome to use olive oil or walnut oil. Now, be cautious with the walnut oil or the olive oil. If you plan on leaving the cutting board just sitting there for an extended period of time, do not do it. Don't just rinse it. But if you're going to use it on a regular basis, which I hope everyone does, and I'll be looking, hope everyone does use it on a regular basis. And if you do that, olive oil, walnut oil, fair game, no issue there. And you got your care instructions there if you're going to send it as a Christmas present or anything like that. But again, this is what I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed it for today. Please browse the channel, like, subscribe. Merry Christmas to everyone out there.